Okay, let's go straight to screen share. And it's Tanya, chapter 19, part 4, and it's going to show an inexplicable picture. He's showing a picture of a pomegranate tree, rimonim. Why would I show rimonim? So we happen to have in our backyard, Baruch Hashem, we have a beautiful garden. It is, we have 4 fruit trees. And my wife, God bless her, is magnificent at taking care of the garden. It's her pride and joy. And I'm glad, because otherwise it'd probably look like, if I took care of it, looked like it was a Shemitah year every year with not being taken care of. In any case, one of the trees we have is a rimon, is a pomegranate tree. And years ago, when it was the end of the season, and the leaves are starting to fall off and all, we have 4 trees. The 3 of the trees, the leaves will stay on the tree. Wake up one day and I noticed the pomegranate tree, absolutely not a single leaf on it. All it is you'd think it was winter in Chicago, that all the leaves fell off and the tree is dead. And literally dead. That's what it looked like to me. So I went to check with Morenu V'Rabbeinu Rav HaGaon HaGadol, the Rashka Bahag, Morenu Rav Google, and asked, what's the deal? Why does my pomegranate tree look like it's dead? Do we have to take it up, uproot it, and put a new tree? Answer is Rav Google, no, it's dormant. The way the pomegranate tree works, at the end of the season, after it's given all of its fruit, and Baruch Hashem this year was a bumper crop, because it's after Shemitah year, so that's pretty cool, is the fact that after it's given its crop, then all the leaves fall off and it goes dormant. Dormant, or dormir, which means to sleep. Here it's the word dormitory. And then when the time is right, it starts to have some buds and flowering, and then eventually fruit, and then once again goes through the cycle. Why am I mentioning this bit of, I guess there will be agronomic factoid? Because this really is the topic of this chapter. This topic of this chapter has been the concept of what's called the ahava mesuteret, the hidden love, the love that connects us to Hashem at all times, no matter where a person is in their life. And for many people, that love is dormant. It's there. In other words, you look at that pomegranate tree, and you look at the empty branches and the no leaves and everything else. If someone take a peek and say, "Oh, your tree died. It's time to get a new tree." But instead, the reality is that it's dormant. It's waiting for the right set of circumstances for the rimonim to start to sprout again, or to bud once again. The same thing is true when it comes to the ahava mesuteret, which we've seen, which we talked about until we've gone through about 3/4 of this chapter. And we see that the idea is that even in a Russia, even in someone who's evil, remember, we're talking here in Tanya, which we spent very long time on a long time ago. The topic of Russia, Tzaddik, and Benoni have a very, very different connotation in Tanya. But right now, we're just going to talk about the colloquial meaning of Russia. The guy's a bad guy. He's no good. He's a poshea. He's someone not just he doesn't know, but he knows, and he still does the wrong things. The ahava mesuteret is still there. It's dormant, waiting for something to happen. As the Balatanya writes, he refers to it as a nisayon lekadesh Hashem, when he's faced with a test of his, in which he has to do some form of kiddush Hashem. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. But what I want to do is, those of you who've been following this class for a long time, you know that I mentioned last week that when we finish a chapter, we have this Rav New, who gives us a summary of the chapter. It's called Tanya in 5. I'm actually going to play it now, because 95% of what he says is a very good summary up to where we are now. And he makes a little comment at the end about something we haven't yet done, which is fine. So I'm going to take a look at that. Tell me first.
The last few days.
Can you see it on your screen? Just shake your head up and down, yes or no. You can. Yes. You see this rabbi with the nice beard. Yes.
We have been studying chapter 19. In chapter 18, we established that every Jew has within them the godly spark, and that godly spark contains...
You cannot hear? Okay, hold on one second. Let me, I have an idea. Oh, I know why.
We hear it, but we can't see it.
Right, I know why. Okay, let me stop share and restart the share. Hold on one second. Share with sound, and I will restart the video. You should be able to see him now. Yes, we see him and we hear him.
Welcome back to Tanya in 5. The last few days we have been studying chapter 19. In chapter 18 we established that every Jew has within them the godly spark, and that godly spark contains the ahava musateres, the hidden love for God. This hidden love, as we described, is super rational and is expressed in faith. In chapter 19, the Alter Rebbe now is going to give us a deeper understanding of what exactly is the nature of this hidden love. You see, in the preceding chapters, in 17 and before that, where we discussed love of God that is born out of a deep understanding and contemplation on the beauty and greatness of God, the love there is experienced by an intense desire to want to get closer to God. Feelings of attraction. This is how most love is experienced. There's a person there, I'm here, and because I love that person, I want to get closer. Now that experience of love implies that there's some distance between the one who's loving and God toward whom I am expressing love. And therefore I want to get closer, because right now we're at a distance. Now this love is not the same thing, because this love, as we described in chapter 18, is a godly spark that's already there. So it's not as if there's some distance between this godly spark and God that he wants to get closer. So what exactly is the experience of this love? We might use the word in English, existential, to describe this love. It's an existential state of being. I am Jewish. I have a part of God in me, and nothing in the world can change that fact. And I will give up everything in the world if it means I'm going to maintain that existential state of me being attached to God. In fact, if my soul had its way, it would completely abandon this world, abandon my body, and lose itself within its ultimate source, God himself. Like a flame that's dancing, trying to jump out of the wick, even though if the flame left the wick, it would stop being a flame. It doesn't matter. It's inexplicable. It wants to leave its current state of being and descend. The same thing is true of the godly soul. If it had its way, because of its existential being a part of God, it would abandon everything to be literally a part of God. Now, the reality is that God took that godly spark and put it into an animal soul and a body. And the animal soul and the body leads us to distractions. The beauty of the world around us and all of the desires and pleasures that it offers and all the anxiety it gives us distract us from that existential attachment we feel to God. And therefore, this attachment is kind of asleep while I'm being distracted by the pleasures and worries of this world. But if it came to an event that touched at the core of my existential attachment to God, that sleeping hidden love will come roaring out and fight back to everything, not to, God forbid, detach itself from its existential attachment to God. And so, as it has happened in history, and God forbid, should it ever happen again, if a Jew is told, you bow down to that idol and denounce your relationship with God, or you are put to death, the Jew will choose death. Inexplicably. Not because the Jew is some big scholar and understands that it's going to get a share in the world to come. That's not the way it was in history. There were Jews who were not such observant Jews and still gave up their lives. Why? Because there is a neshama that is existentially attached to God. And when it is prodded and when it is woken up, it will give up on everything, including its very life, rather than to denounce or detach itself from God alone. In modern terms, we might see this experienced and expressed in the following scenario. I'm sure you've experienced this. You meet someone, a Jew, who is a self-professed atheist. And then you tell them, oh, you know, you're an atheist, you're not Jewish. Now all of a sudden, a person's offended. I'm not Jewish? Of course I'm Jewish. Well, rationally speaking, if you're an atheist, what makes you a Jew? It doesn't matter. It's not a rational thing. An neshama cannot accept the fact that it's not Jewish. So it can rationalize its way to all kinds of beliefs. God does exist, God doesn't exist, but don't you dare tell me I'm not Jewish. That's this super rational soul attachment that the Jew has to godliness, that it cannot give it up. And so we see that this existential attachment to God also incorporates fear. Existential attachment to God and existential fear of detachment from God. The takeaway from all of this is, don't think you need to convince yourself or other Jews to have faith. They already have it, and you already have it. It's just a question of finding that which will prod and poke that faith so that it comes to the fore. Looking forward to seeing you when we...
All right, let me stop that. Hold on. Okay. Oop. Close that and come back to y'all. Okay. So I like, the reason I played is I like how he condenses everything, what we've been saying till now. One of the things he did not mention, one of the terms or concepts he did not mention, I want to just add before we go back into the text now, is that I used the term, and he said it also, I think, dormant. That's where we started off this evening. But in addition to dormant, which Tanya is going to talk about in a minute, he also referenced the idea of galut, that remember that the chokhmah is this direct connection we talked about to Hashem. The root of this love for Hashem, this avah mesuteret, is in chokhmah, which is this direct connection to Hashem, which we never lose. But what do you mean we don't lose? Where is it? So it's ki'ilu in galut, in exile within the body, in the nefesh bahamit, in the animal soul. And again, remember, the animal soul does not mean we're animals. This is the early days of Tanya. Those who joined later in Tanya, it's worthwhile going back to reread or to read some of the early things about the definitions of the nefesh elokit, nefesh bahamit, klipa, because those are the foundations of understanding Tanya. So it's in galut, it's in exile. And he actually is now going to take a look at the text, and we're going to see how that actually plays out into the next few lines. Let me just get that on the screen. Okay. This is where we left off. With all this buildup, even though I told you verbally, now we're going to see it inside. Therefore, based on the idea that every Jew has this connection to Hashem, based on the fact that every Jew has this neshama elokit that has the chokhmah and the connection to Hashem, based on the fact that this ahava mesuteret, this hidden innate love, is in galut, is in exile within it's been moved from the nefesh elokit side to the nefesh bahamit side. Lachein, therefore, nikret ahava, and it comes out when we're tested, and what that test is different for every person. Therefore, nikret ahava zo benefesh elokit sheritzona v'chafetza ledabek b'Hashem chayei achayim baruch hu b'shem ahava mesuteret. Therefore, this love, which is always present, but sometimes is hidden because of various circumstances, because we ourselves, by our actions or our inactions, have sent this ahava this love into galut, into exile, into hiding, into a stage of dormancy within our body, again, spiritually, not physically. That's the reason it's called the ahava mesuteret, or the hidden, like the histater, to hide, right? Hidden love. Why? Ki hi mesuteret mechuse bilvusak teklipa b'poshei Yisrael. Actually, b'poshei Yisrael. That it's hidden and covered up in the clothing, and I'll explain this expression to bilvusak in a minute, in the klipa, the poshei Yisrael. Remember, the klipa is that which is like the shell that prevents, that hides kedusha. Okay, in the very simplistic sense right now, it is the opposite of kedusha. It has the potential for kedusha. Once that klipa, that shell, is removed, it's hidden within there. Now, why does he say it's hidden and mechuseh and covered? Bilvush sak. What's levush sak? So it's an expression you should know from the book of Esther. We see in multiple times. It's also said in other places in Eicha and others, but especially it's bolet, it's very pronounced in Megillat Esther that Mordechai sat bilvush sak. He put on sak va'efa yutzah larabim. It's a symbol or sign of mourning. Again, this neshama, this part of the neshama, the nefesh elokit, this chokhmah, this ava mesuteret, doesn't want to be mesuteret. It's in galut. It wants to be, it's mourning the fact that it's in galut. It wants to come out. Umimena, here we're going to continue. Umimena, and from it, let me find my book. What happens when a person does an Aveirah? What happens? If you are standing in the presence of a king, a human king, would you sit there and like spit on the floor in front of the king? Would you, if the king tells you to do something, would you refuse? Would you? Of course not. So why does a person do an Aveirah when they do it? Why do they sin? So there's all kinds of reasons. One, you could say that they're the lack of recognition of the presence of Hashem. I wouldn't do it if I recognized Hashem was present. Shiviti Hashem negdi tamid. But there's a statement that the Chazal tell us, Chazal, it's the same thing. Rabotenu zichronam livracha, ein adam chotei v'chulei. What is ein adam chotei? A person doesn't sin. The full quote is, Ela im kein nichnas bo ruach shtut. A person only sins when foolishness enters into him. What's the foolishness? What's the foolishness? Would you be so foolish as to go against the rebel, against the king in front of his face? So what we do. That's the way it works. That's who we are as human beings. Ella shegalut hazeh lebechinat chochma eino ella lebechinat hamitpashetet mimena benefesh kula lachiota. That this chochma is in galut, but it's still spread out through the neshama to give it life. Remember, we said that the chokhmah gives the chiyut or the life to the person. Avo shoresh v'ikar shel bechina chokhmah shebenefesh elokit ubemochin. But the source, the root of the concept of the characteristic of chokhmah that's in the nefesh elokit is there. That's a long sentence, which in normal English just means, again, he's saying that at that moment when a person sins, that the even though the chokhmah was in there in the brain, so to speak, the part that the direct connect to Hashem has gone into galut. It's now gone into the left side of the heart, again in the anthropomorphic sense, in the sense of a mashal or a parable. It's gone into the left-hand side, which we said is the nefesh habahamit. It's not the nefesh elokit, it's in the animalistic soul, animal soul. And that's where it sits. Now, and what is it doing there? What's it doing there? It's dormant. Before I go to that mashal, let me just see here 1 second. Let me finish one more sentence. I'm going to show you this mashal that this Rab Silberberg tells. It's magnificent. So what is it? What's happening to the soul? This soul, this love is asleep by Risha'im. And it doesn't take action. It doesn't connect to Hashem in a proactive sense. As long as they're doing what they want to do, as long as they're involved in the desires of this world, again, it could be just eating. It doesn't have to be something, bad, in quotes. As long as they're not focused on Hashem, as long as they're not doing a mitzvah, as long as they're not, and especially if they're doing an Aveirah, they're doing a sin, it's taking that ahava mesuteret and pushing it off to the left side of the heart, to the animalistic side, where it's in galut. It's dormant. Now, it's very nice what he is saying. But listen to, I don't usually do 2 videos in one night, but this is about 5-6 minutes. This is very worthwhile listening to. Let me set this up for you, as they say. So first, let me, instead of doing a click on it, let me cut and paste it. Copy, and the share. So he's going to tell the story again, but I'm going to tell it anyways. Some of you may remember this. We talked about this in, I forgot which class already. There's a woman that the prophet Elisha comes to, and she's poor. Her son is about to be taken away as the payment for a debt. She has nothing. She's crying out to the prophet, help me, help me. And he asks her, what do you have in the house? She says, all I have is this little teeny flask of oil. He tells her to go to all the neighbors and get as many containers as he can, and as she can, and put them in the house and close the blinds, and then take that little flask of oil and pour and pour and pour and pour and pour and pour and fill up all these jars and bottles and everything. And then from that, he says, then it stops flowing. And from that oil, you now can sell the oil, because oil was very expensive and was a form of currency. And with doing that, then you can pay off your debt, and your son can stay in Shalom Yisrael. It's an amazing story. It's a powerful story in Navi. But listen how that story is actually a parable for this entire concept of the Ahava Mesuteret. So first, before I go to the video, whoops, I almost canceled the meeting just now by accident. Okay, hold on. Give me 1 second. Paste. You get past the commercial. Okay, so now let me share this. Share this. Okay, make this. Make sure you can.
I said, and the idea behind it. I spoke about it al Pichsidus.
You see her in here, yes?
Okay, we'll repeat it quickly. So you repeat it.
You did it much nicer. I remember you said.
Okay, so it says in the book of Malachim, there's this woman, this widow, who comes to the Navi Elisha, and she was the widow of another Navi, the Navi Avadia, and her husband had borrowed a lot of money for whatever reasons.
He died.
And he died, and he left his wife with the debt. And the debtor now was coming, and she had no money. And all she had was 2 children. So the debtor was saying that he's going to take the 2 children as his slaves. So the woman comes crying to Elisha and saying, please help me. You know, my husband served Hashem. And actually, as Chazal tell us, he borrowed the money for righteous reasons. There were 100 Nevi'im who he saved from the wicked Izebel, and he personally took care of them and he fed them. So he incurred this debt for tzedakah purposes. So please help. So the Navi says, what do you have in your home? And she said, all I have is a asuch shaman, a little flask of oil. So the Navi says, that's great. No, well, that wasn't empty. A little flask of oil. I said, so yeah, that's great. So go borrow many vessels, empty vessels. Kelim reikim al tamiti, don't get as many as you can, then you'll go and you'll pour from your little flask, and all of them will become full. Actually, he didn't say that. He said, go and you'll pour from the flask into them. She went and she did it. She got a lot of vessels. She came into the house with her 2 sons, and she started pouring, and it didn't stop. It didn't stop until the last of the containers was filled, and she borrowed many, many containers. The Navi says, okay, now go sell the oil, and you'll be able to repay the debt, and you'll be able to live comfortably from the remainder of the profits. So that's the story as it is in Navi. But as we know that everything is as in the Torah, there's secrets and deeper secrets. So Alter Rebbe explains, and it's actually, it's in a mimer from the Alter Rebbe where it says that someone came into Yechidus by the Alter Rebbe and he cried out to the Alter Rebbe that I've lost my passion. I've lost my excitement, my enthusiasm in serving Hashem. So Alter Rebbe said, just like you're crying to me on Yechidus with this problem, the neshama goes and cries out to Hashem the exact same thing. And that's really this narrative. This woman, a woman is a metaphor for the neshama, and she comes crying to Elisha. Elisha is made up of the words, Kelisha, God, please listen to me. And she says, here's what's happening. She says, I have nothing. I'm all gone. I have no love. I have no fear. I have no feeling. I'm spiritually empty, impoverished. And not only that, but the creditor, the noisha, which noisha means a creditor, but also can mean the one who wants to make me forget. Nashani, the word nashani, you have by Yosef. The nefesh abahamis who wants to make me forget about Hashem is coming to take my 2 children. Who are my two children? We know Ava and Yira, Chesed and Gvura are considered the two children. My love for Hashem and fear for Hashem, he wants to take it and divert it for his purposes. Not only I shouldn't love Hashem, but he wants to take, which is exactly what we're talking about. He wants to channel the energy of the godly soul and channel it towards Elam Haza. So the Navi tells her, which is really Hashem responding, so what do you have? What do you have? You're telling me you have nothing. Do you have anything? She says, yeah, I have this flask of oil. And oil is synonymous with Chachma. In fact, the Gemara tells us about the residents of a certain region in Eretz Yisrael, that why did they have so much Chachma? Because they were Regilim b'Shemen, they had a lot of oil. In Kabbalah, Shemen is in general is a metaphor for oil. And another reason is because oil always rises to the top, and Chachma is the highest faculty. Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. You know, you have, just like we talked last week about Chachma being Kodesh. So Shemen also is Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. So all I have, what the neshama answers, all I have is the very essence of my neshama, my chachma. We're talking about over here. That's pure. It's asleep maybe, but it's pure. That has not been contaminated, and that has not been hijacked by the nefesh Muhammad's. So Hashem says, okay, then you're good. Then take that little flask, gather many, many empty containers. The containers are mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs. They're empty, they have no ava, they have no yira, they have no fear, they have no love. Do many, many mitzvahs and pour into them from the very essence of your neshama, your essential connection to Hashem, and that will reawaken your love and your fear, and you'll be able to live with the remainder of everything. Everything will be fine. I mean, that's really a shir we can give for an hour, just going through each component of that story. A very beautiful explanation of that story, but the point we're having over here is that the neshama, there are different parts to the neshama, and we started speaking about this last week.
Okay, so that's the main thing I wanted to see. This amazing mashal that, and for those of you who were in, I think we did Navi for 12 years, and I probably said at least 100 times during those 12 years that anything that's in Torah, we know for sure, but even Navi, people say, why do we have this story? Why do we have this event? Because it's Ledogo. It's for generations. It's for the Netzach. We always have something to learn. And even from something that sounds like, quote, just a miraculous story, one of the few with Elisha the Navi, it also now tells us on a different level of what it is as far as a mashal, as far as the Balatanya is concerned. So let's continue with the text and go here. Okay. Now, until this point, he's saying, we're going to start with the word ach, right over here. Until this point, he's saying that, okay, so it's dormant, it's sitting there, it's asleep, it's in galut. Now what? What happens? Ach, but, however, kishebaim, when a person comes, lidei nisayon bidvar emunah, when a person comes to a point where he's tested in his emunah, shehi lamala mehadat, it's something supernatural. It's not something that is it's inexplicable. It's not something that's rational. And then it touches his neshama to the point of his chokhmah, meaning it's like, Jew, like, hey, wake up. This issue that's going on right now, it's going counter to your Jewishness. It wakes up from its slumber. Then it gets put, it's it puts into motion this ahava, this love for Hashem, this where I haven't read here. It gets put into motion and it kicks in and says, my neshama says to me, I'm a Jew and I will not stand for this. No matter how far I may be from Hashem, no matter how close I may be to Hashem, it kicks in. What does this mean on a different level? So I have a note here that says Rav Steinsaltz no slide. What that means is I'm not going to put up on the screen what he wrote. I have it in front of me. I'm going to read it without I'm going to read the Hebrew in my brain and read it to you in English. He says like this: for every person, there is a point at which his normal, his life, his certain parameters are going to explode. What does that mean? Let's say, for example, you tell a guy who is religious, who davens every day, today you cannot put on tefillin. You can't put on tefillin. I mean, I go crazy. I haven't missed a day, B'li Her, Baruch Hashem, B'li Her. Chamsa is the day my bar mitzvah. You tell me that I cannot put on tefillin today. You have to skip putting on tefillin. It'd be horrible. And in order to, he says, I want to use a certain type of an example, a mashal or a parable. And it has to do with a dream. And every dream of when there's something horrible that happens, and we've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, I see it unfortunately more often than I like to, that there's a certain point, you get to a certain point in the dream where even your subconscious cannot handle what's happening. And you wake up. Your brain will not allow you to cross a certain line, even when you're asleep. A person who is in galut, a person who's in exile, will sometimes build for himself rationalizations, and with those, they can be philosophical on different levels, and they can live a life of achol v'shateh, which means like eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die, in the most simplistic form. And a person may not even have much more desire in life. Well, let's get through life, plow through life, I'm eat and drink, do what I want to do. But there is a certain point in that person's rubric and that framework that he has in his mind that he's aware of, that he cannot stand to go beyond a certain red line, meaning in what we would term, Rav Steinsaltz doesn't use this, this is me saying, everyone has their red line when it comes to their religious belief and their way they connect to Hashem. That person at that point, his rationalizations will no longer help him. A person, let's say, who's not religious says, well, like Rav New was saying, maybe God exists, maybe he doesn't exist, maybe he does exist, but he couldn't care less if I do mitzvot. So he has these rationalizations. Why do I bother to waste my time, doing this mitzvah? God's got better things to do than pay attention to me. But there gets to a certain point where he says, ad kan, until this point. And what is that certain point? So the words that he used was nisayon bidvar emunah, right here. Nisayon bidvar emunah, which means a test when it comes to his belief system, belief in Hashem. We've already said that there's a critical point that causes this evil explosion, but it's different from person to person. It also depends on time, it depends on place. This is all Rav Steinsaltz, by the way. That's why I keep looking down. For some people, that point might be just to tell them to move something muksa on Shabbat. Chas v'shalom, I'm not going to move something. By the way, you could touch something muksa on Shabbat. You can't move something muksa. Doesn't mean you should go out of your way to touch it, but you're not doing anything wrong if you touch something muksa. But for some people, that red line might be, God forbid, you're going to make me do something muksa, which is, quote, only the Rabbanan. And for some people, it may be shemad. What's shemad? We're going to kill you because you're Jewish, or we're going to force you to do something against your religion just because you're Jewish. But with every single Jew, there is this certain point that a certain pressure point, so to speak, that gets pressed, that he gets to a point of subjectivity, that he understands that this line is a line I won't cross. That, says Rav Steinsaltz, that is what the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya is telling us, that every single Jew has. Let's put it into a different, using his concept, but just a different perspective for a moment. There have been many occasions over the last 25, 30 years where people have asked me before Tisha B'Av, and especially Yom Kippur, if they have to fast, maybe for some illness or some other reason. And more so, I've seen it with Yom Kippur because it's much more chamur, much more severe. There'll be people who I will say, not only you don't have to fast, it's prohibited for you to fast. And I get pushback. Are you sure? I mean, it's so important. I've had people in the middle of chemotherapy said, you sure? I can't fast. And I said, first you have to ask your doctor. I know what the doctor's going to say usually. But in any case, why? What is it about it? You're being told it's Tisha B'Av. You're being told it's Yom Kippur. I know it's a severe fast, but I am telling you that you're allowed to and you must eat. I had one person in particular once a few years ago on Tisha B'Av. Someone, so to speak, tattletaled and called me, said that so and so is sick. She's not eating, she's not drinking, she's fasting, and I know her condition. I called her up and I told her as follows: either you hang up the phone with me now, and you eat and drink, especially drink, or I'm coming over there and I'm going to force feed you. I'm going to have someone hold your mouth open. I'm going to pour water down your throat. Well, she ate, she drank. Why? What is it? Why is it that when people in the last couple of weeks have called me, not so much this past Shabbat, but 2 Shabbatot ago, do I have to carry my phone? Can I carry my phone? Should I stay home instead of carrying my phone in public? This way I have it available. Da, 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 da. Why? What's the pushback? Put that off the side for a second. Why is it that the guy, and I told this story yesterday, 2 nights ago in the Tefillah class. I'm going to retell it now. For those of you who've heard it, I'm sorry, but it's fresh in my mind still. And I'm come back to this statement I just made before. Story just happened a couple days ago. There's a guy in the community here, Israeli guy, born Israeli, who told me that he entered into a conversation on WhatsApp starting from before Pesach until recently with one of the women who was signing a bid to the Supreme Court to permit bringing chametz into hospitals during Pesach. She was super left-wing, is super left-wing. She says, you're not going to tell me that I can't bring in chametz to the hospitals. And she went as far as the Bagatz to the Supreme Court and brought it. And he started a conversation over the last number of months. I guess to understand where she was coming from, maybe he felt he could have a little hashpah on her. I don't know exactly. And then he took his phone, he went like this. He held it up to me, he said, take a look at this. And it was a picture. The woman sent a picture of her tying tzitzit for soldiers. She said, because this is what has to be. Here's a woman who wanted to enable people to do things that are chayav karet, and she understood that when push comes to shove, and our very existence is on the line, that's the line she won't cross. She calls out. That's the Ahava Mesuteret calling out to Hashem. Why is it I get pushback from people when it came to Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av or carrying the phone when I tell them they have to carry it in certain cases? Because it goes against their nature. This Ahava, there's a certain line they don't want to cross. And that reticence is that Ahava Mesuteret. I love Hashem, and I don't think I should be doing this. This isn't the right thing. But it is the right thing. Just like there's a chiyuv to fast, there's a chiyuv to not fast also. Someone asked me another question the other day. Let me think, make sure she's not in this group. Who asked me? Just a minute. No, she's not in this group. She sent me a message. She says, I think that I am preventing Mashiach from coming. I said, what pshat? What do you mean? She says, because these Jews, forget the non-Jews, the Jews are out there protesting, for Palestine and Palestinian rights and for Hamas. And she says, I hate them with a passion. And I know that the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam. Maybe my Sinah is preventing the Mashiach from coming. I said, fantastic question, but you're wrong. You are not only not allowed, a pasuk of Avtala Recha Kamocha does not only not apply here, there's a mitzvah to hate these people. She said, what? You have a mitzvah to hate the people who want to destroy the relationship between the Jew and Hashem. This is a milchama keneged Hashem. There's somebody who I know personally who's very high up in the army, who I was talking to him recently, and I put things in perspective for him. And I said, understand, this isn't just a war about the existential war for the state of Israel. It's not just a war because people hate the Jews. This is a war against God. This is what these Yamach Shemamim are. It's a war against Hashem. An affront to the Jewish people is an affront to God. We are his children. All human beings are his children, but we're his favorite children. And his favorite children are getting beat up. Hashem doesn't like that. And the people doing it are an affront to God. And it's a war against God. So whether it's the person who says, how can I eat on Yom Kippur when Hashem said no, and I'm telling you, you have to, or it's the person who said we need to allow people to eat chametz on Pesach and now is making tzitzit for the soldiers because that's what needs to be done right now because that's what Hashem would want. That's the Ahava Mesuteret. That's exactly what we're talking about here. That's this. Nisayon bidvar emunah. It's exactly what we're talking about with me. Balatani is talking about. Uchmoshe Katuv, as it says, Vayikatz ki yashen Hashem, or in Sofam Lubash b'chokhmah. It's as if, in a metaphorical sense, that the Hashem was, so to speak, asleep. Now you'll notice there's a makaf here. See this line? Because we should never put the two words. This is how it appears in the Navi, in Tilim, where it's printed. It's a Tilim. Yeah, Tilim. Hold on. Let me see before I misquote it. Just a second. Tilim Ayin Chet. That if you look at a Tilim, you'll see that there's a makaf or a line, because we never have the word Yashen or next to Hashem's name. You don't want to say them it's next to it, but you want to say them beretzef, like one of the Yashen Hashem, like Hashem is sleeping. It's meant as a metaphor that reawakens the what is the quote Hashem that's awakening? It's the Or Ein Sof, the supernal light of Hashem, i.e. the Chokhmah, that gets awakened when they're revealed, when they're put to the test of a Nisayon bidvar emunah. That's where the Ahava Mesuteret comes from. La'amod b'nisayon be'emunat Hashem b'lishum ta'am b'dat v'sechel musaglo. To stand up to this test of emunah, and it's absolutely inexplicable. Why is it this woman who wanted to enable people to eat chametz on Pesach? It's not chazer. Chazer is one isur, to eat pork. One isur, it's the same thing as doing some other avera. This is correct. And this woman's making tzitzit. It's inexplicable. What did she do, for example, using this example, the story, that she was overcome the klipot, this shell, and the desires of this world, to the way they've got, she or other people have gotten accustomed to things that are prohibited. And to be despised by them, or to find them despicable, and instead, to choose God. To give up his life almost, as it were, for the Kedushat Hashem. Now, this woman didn't give up her life, but in a sense, she did. She gave up her belief to do this. Her kol kulo, her entire being was, I go to Gatz, I go to the Beit Din, I go to the Supreme Court. I'm going to make sure the Jews can have the right to eat chametz on Pesach. Inexplicably, she now is making tzitzit. Inexplicably, she gave up her quote, her nefesh, her life, because that's not who I am. This is who I am. Does that mean she's going to always be that way? I don't know. Who cares? Basher Husham, right now, this is how she is. And that's what we're telling you. But that's what the Balatanya is telling us here, is that it is inexplicable, but every single Jew has that in him or her. And that's why he also uses this word Nisayon Bidvar Emunah, because as Rav News said, you don't have to try and say, oh, do I have Emunah? We all have to work on our Emunah, but every Jew has Emunah in there somewhere. Tov, okay. We'll stop here. There's a lot to digest. Bezrat Hashem will continue the normal time next week. And let's just pray for all the soldiers and all Kochot HaBitachon and all the Chatufim, all the kidnapped people, that we should see a resolution quickly with no one getting injured or hurt, except our enemies who should be destroyed. L'chalutin. Have a good evening, everybody, and a good day.